personally, I was just reflecting during the anthems. One of the special things of this event is that we're reminded of those people that we call mom or dad or uncle or friend. We're just reminded of your service. And I just think that's an amazing, it's an amazing moment in the year for us to just remember that and to say thank you. So I just want to say thank you. I want to thank you to all of those that I know personally and I see all the time. Randy, thank you for your service. And Warren, thank you for your service. And those I work with, Amy Elker, thank you for your service. And those of you I don't know, thank you for your service. It's just a great time today just to remember and to value you. So we celebrate you today. You know, the Lord provides a great keynote message every year that we need to hear, and this year is no exception. So before I introduce Larry, I just want to just tell everyone in the room, if you or someone you know is a veteran and has a story that needs to be told, just encourage you to contact me and let me know so that we can continue every year to have the great guests that we do. We're so excited for this year's special speaker because this year we're going to hear a little different side of the military story. We're going to hear about the military civil operations that are so important to everything we do around the world. So today we welcome Colonel Larry Raaf. He is a 1973 Salem Academy graduate. So you can go ahead and clap for that. And he retired in 2007 after 30 years of military service. His awards and badges include the Bronze Star, the Combat Action Badge, Expert Field Medical Badge, and the Legion of Merit. He is married to Lieutenant Colonel Kathy Raaf, who is also retired, and they have a son and a daughter. Their daughter Karen graduated from Salem Academy in 2009. Colonel Raaf received his commission through the Army ROTC program at Oregon State University in 1977. A distinguished military student, he was branched Medical Service Corps, and his initial active duty assignments include platoon leader, company executive officer, 45th Medical Battalion, 3rd Armored Division, and recovery team leader, Amish Military Assistance Advisory Group, U.S. Embassy, Tehran, in Iran, 1979. Entering the reserves in 1984, Colonel Raaf served in a variety of positions, including command of 2 companies, medical and civil affairs, and the 448th Civil Affairs Battalion, supporting the 25th Infantry Division. He has served as an Inspector General for the 104th Division and various staff positions with the 364th Civil Affairs Brigade, and most recently as Deputy Commander and Chief of Staff. Colonel Raaf deployed to Bosnia in 1997 as a member of CJTF 351, a combined joint civil military operations task force, serving as the NATO liaison officer to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. He deployed to the U.S. Embassy, Manila, Philippines in 2002 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, Philippines, and JTF 510 as a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. In 2003 and 2004, Colonel Raaf served as the Deputy Commander and then Commander of Task Force Victory, the Combined Joint Civil Military Operations Task Force in Afghanistan, an organization of 1,200 U.S. and Allied soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. We are so blessed to have with us today Colonel Larry Raaf.
Test, test. Oh, my goodness. I knew this was either going to work or I was going to go up in a puff of smoke. Well, good morning, Salem Academy. It's great to be back. I say that I spent 6 years here and I didn't have to even repeat a grade. So I was blessed to attend Salem Academy. Following school here, graduated from high school, I was again blessed to receive a scholarship from the Army and attend Oregon State University. And like they say, the rest is history. This morning I'm going to talk a little bit about civil military operations, which are things that our military conducts, but you may not have heard much about. Let me start with my slide projector here. Oh, too soon. So civil military operations are when we work with the host nation to support not only their individuals, but their government in restoring from a war, a natural disaster, or other calamity. So this began back at the end of World War II with the defeat of Germany and Japan. And our leaders at the time decided that what was best for those countries and what's been our enemies was to help establish a democratic model for them to emulate. So again, our leaders picked the best and brightest folks they could find and sent them to help restore the country. And this is restoration from the ground up. Imagine Salem, imagine Oregon without electricity, without rail, without roads, without hospitals, all those things that we take for granted. And in those countries, these things were in ruins. So those are the kind of things we do. We assist our fighting military forces in working with the locals anywhere in the world. I'm going to show you some slides in a couple seconds here, specific to Afghanistan, but we have conducted these operations other places in the world, Bosnia, Iraq, the Horn of Africa, and such. My wife couldn't be here today. She has another more pressing commitment, but now I can show that slide. She's always been pretty lucky at being on deployment when famous people are around. And again, I don't know if she's a magnet for that, but this is a picture with Gary Sinise that she took on deployment. She also met President Bush, Mrs. Bush, Secretary of State, and I could almost guarantee if I heard back there in my office that the President was en route to some place that she was, within a couple hours, I'd get a picture. So, lucky her, I never had that kind of luck. This picture shows me and a guy I was working with who had been in Afghanistan for a year. I definitely am the newbie. I have the helmet on. I have all the gear that I'm wearing. And as you can see, he's kind of been there, done that, and prepared for everything. Next picture is me a year later when the helmet isn't necessary any longer. And this was actually at a religious historical site in the city of Bamiyan, where the Taliban had destroyed some ancient ruins that were there, and we were working with the UN to help restore those areas. There are also fun things to do, like flying out on the tailboard of a helicopter, so we had those opportunities too. In fact, in that country, because there's no rail and the roads are pretty bad, we flew just about everywhere we went. Here's a little kind of orientation map to kind of show you the size of Afghanistan and where it is in the world. It's about the size of Texas. We had about 1,200 military personnel with us. We actually had some civilian personnel too from the Department of State, Department of Agriculture, and other U.S. federal agencies that were all part of our team working in Afghanistan. How we did our business was through the establishment of what were called Provincial Reconstruction teams. And this was a site spread out across the country. that we had 75 or 100 military personnel, plus augmented by some civilians. And we worked with the local provincial leaders to provide a variety of services and help them get off their feet, or back on their feet. Before the U.S. forces arrived in Afghanistan, the country had been at war with Russia for a number of years, and the country was in ruins. Following the departure of the Russians, the Taliban moved in, and they were still at war with the Taliban. How we operate is, as you heard the song this morning, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and some civilian agencies. Whenever we deploy as a team, as a U.S. Coalition team. And whenever we can, we deploy with other nations. So while I was in Afghanistan, we had people from France, from Germany, from Australia, from the Czech Republic, from New Zealand, and a number of other places, South Korea, that were all there focused on one thing, and that was to help restore Afghanistan and help this country move on. I'll show some slides here about the specific things that we were involved in while I was there. First was elections. Elections are truly a way to determine how democratic the processes are in a country. And as you can see, the comments here, 40% of the voters were women. 11 million people were registered and voted. And their ballots are pretty interesting. When my daughter was attending school here, I actually had given her a ballot, and an Afghan ballot is about this long. It's pretty lengthy. So, again, elections, something that we supported. Refugees and returns. So the organization I worked with in Bosnia, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, is focused on not only getting refugees, which are people that have been pushed out of their country into neighboring countries, but people who are internally displaced, that maybe used to live in a certain town like Salem, and because of the war, ended up living in Portland or some other part of their area. A lot of effort was put into that, and it's just another measure of returning the country to normalcy. Reconstruction. A lot of organizations that don't belong to governments, they're called non-governmental organizations or NGOs, provide money and resources and staff to, again, assist in a variety of projects to restore a nation. You might notice on here, World Vision, a major player in places around the world, such as Bosnia, such as Iraq, such as Afghanistan. Schools. The Taliban targeted schools often, and girls' schools in particular. The schools in that country and in that part of the world, boys and girls attend different schools. And so one of the ways to stop trust in the local and national government was to destroy schools. Here was the good news, another grand opening. The local leadership of the province, always there, as well as the military assistance that we provided. Here's a kind of before and after picture of the same school. And then finally, as I mentioned, here's outside the base where I was stationed in Bagram, there's a girls' school that's been totally restored. I also mentioned that there were separate schools for boys and girls. Well, healthcare is provided separately also. Women and children are seen separately from men, and that provides some challenges for our folks in providing separate services, but they were able to do that. My wife, Kathy, is a registered nurse, was an Army nurse at the time, and she went out and worked on medical issues that were going on. As you can see, many of the facilities and buildings are pretty old and almost take you back to biblical times in terms of their construction. Here's another clinic that was built. And we'll move on to something very important. Afghanistan is a very arid area, and water is very important. And so we had teams that would put in wells, local water wells, for use by the population as well as their animals and animals. So this is a picture of one of our enforcement teams, and because our civil military operations involved helping restore law enforcement, helping restore city and provincial governments, we have law enforcement officers. In fact, the woman that's in this picture in the center is a police officer with the city of Seattle. And they were able to use their law enforcement skills to help the Afghan police start carrying out more Western-style law enforcement activities. Next picture shows, talks about roads and infrastructure. And as I mentioned, there are no railroads in Afghanistan at all. That we flew most everywhere we went, and the roads were pretty tough. And depending on the season, they could be quite a challenge. So here is roads on a dry day. You might think it looks like a road. It also kind of looks like a goat path. But that's the roads on a good day. Here's roads on not so good a day. And I know, as an example, my wife went out on a medical mission, and 2 or 3 of their Hummers actually lost their axles and had to be left and picked up later by a recovery team. So a very challenging place to work, regardless of the season. We, when our group arrived, we didn't have any armored vehicles, no Hummers, nothing at all. We had what were called Afghan rental vehicles. And these were old SUVs. Some of them didn't have doors on them. They looked like something out of the movie The Road Warrior. And so about 3 weeks into our tour, we had to turn them in. And they gave us what they said were newer Afghan rental vehicles. One of our Provincial Reconstruction teams that came and picked theirs up left 3 of them along the road dead on their way back to their site. So it wasn't until the end of our tour that we had any armored vehicles at all. Here's a common sight in Afghanistan and other parts of the Middle East called a jingle truck, mainly because they have chains hanging off the bottom and they kind of make a jiggly sound. But these trucks are always overloaded, they're always all over the road, and a lot of times they're dead on the side of it. And I don't know how they make these things continue to work. Most of them are 30 or 40 years old, they come from Europe, and you see drivers under these trucks trying to get them to work. I don't know, it's like they're making parts out of dirt or something to get them to operate again. But pretty amazing and pretty colorful. Next slide is restoration of a cement factory. They did not have these operations for 20 years because of the war with the Russians and the Taliban. And this factory, once we were able to get it reopened, employed 150 people. So small projects like this, larger projects like roads and highways, but all focused on the same thing. So there was a movie a few years ago with John Goodman and some other folks called Monuments Men. And it was a true story about civil military operations people in World War II that arrived in Europe as World War II was ending. And their mission was to try to save artwork that the Nazis had stolen from many countries and try to get to it, preserve it before it was destroyed. The current civil military operations have the same thing. We have teams that are called arts, monuments, and archives. And not only do they look for things like this to protect, but when our military is engaging in combat operations, we work with the planning folks to create protected target lists to make sure churches, schools, other buildings like that are not destroyed as part of the operations. humanitarian assistance. In this picture, kids are getting school supplies. A lot of our soldiers would write back to their friends and family here in the United States and ask for school supplies, ask for things that the schools could need. The picture of Gary Sinise, he had a project to do those very things along with books. And my wife, because she was a nurse, would write back to Salem Clinic and Salem Hospital and ask for outdated medical textbooks to send to Afghanistan because they literally had nothing to use. So just another piece of the CMO operations. Some of the hardest working people on our teams were our veterinarians. Afghanistan is a very rural country. It's very agriculture based, and the 3 veterinarians on our team work easily 12 hours a day, 7 days a week around the country, ministering to the animals, which are the life of most of the people that live in Afghanistan. This individual, Major Trudy Salerno, is from Eugene, and she, like I said, they did amazing work. They did a lot to help the economy of Afghanistan recover. So you already saw this slide once, but I wanted to use this as a tie-in because I know there are students in the audience that have thought about the military. Gee, would that be a good career? Would I enjoy that? Would I fit in? And I hope as importantly as those other questions is, will it challenge my faith? How will I be ministered to while I'm serving in one of the branches of the military? Well, the U.S. military takes your spiritual welfare and well-being very seriously. All the branches have chaplains. They have ordained ministers and chapels. And every unit that I belong to has had chapel services scheduled. So it's a good connection outside of the church or Christian education. It's probably the only organization I can think of that has a focus on ensuring that your spiritual needs are taken care of. And I was lucky enough, I'm going to back that up a second. I was lucky enough when I came back from Afghanistan to bring a flag back that had flown in our task force in Afghanistan. And actually, we flew it on a flagpole over on the football field. Now, it didn't help the team win the game, unfortunately, but it was a great opportunity and something I really appreciated. I played football here too, not very well, but I played. And so getting a chance to come back and visit the academy again was a great experience. In closing, just like to say thank you to the veterans that are all here. There is a definition of veterans I'd like to read. And it says a veteran is someone who wrote a blank check to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. So thank you, veterans. Thank you, Salem Academy, and go Crusaders.